Every day, you essentially pay your dues by doing the harder thing when it's the right thing to do. All right, hey everyone, welcome to another Hero Lab webinar here. And this is one that when surveying people, they really said this was something they wanted to know more about. I think a lot of people want to know, if they're a medical provider or a strength coach, they want to know, how do I, get my foot in the door with a gym? Or if they're a gymnastics coach or a gym owner, they want to know, how do I find good people to work with that are medical providers or strength coaches, nutritionists or sports psychologists, mental health providers. A lot of people are kind of searching for, other people who are experts in their different fields around gymnastics, kind of trying to figure out how to find those people, what to look for, and how to really build a nice cohesive team. And I think as we see the sport of gymnastics changing so much, we're seeing this more and more evolve as kind of our main go-to model, which is, again, a lot of different people maybe sharing the different expertise roles to help the athletes perform as best as possible and stay as healthy as possible. So when I asked people about, how can I help? What do you want to learn about? A lot of people wanted to know my experiences and my advice for, how I got started working with gyms, or when I was a coach, how did I find the right professionals to help out expertises that weren't mine? And then also, as a medical provider, a lot of people want to know, like I said, how to work with gyms and find a good working relationship. It can be really hard. Sometimes it can be really challenging in our culture to find a good group of people who are all kind of on the same page for how to best help the athletes. So hopefully this lecture will provide a little bit of insight for that. Okay, and I really think that this is important to talk about because I feel as though the future of gymnastics is going to move towards this model of, a gymnastics performance team, right? It's not going to be just the coach juggling like 39 different hats and having to talk to different people and go back and forth, right? I think it's going to become more and more like the NCAA model, which if you've ever had experience in the NCAA or you've done any work in the NCAA or you've coached or been a gymnast yourself or an athlete, you watch NCAA, what you'll know is that they have a team of people who all work with the athletes, right? They have their gymnastics coaches. They usually have a head coach, assistant coaches, but then they also usually have a strength and conditioning coach. They have an athletic trainer or a medical provider. They have a team doctor. They have a sports nutritionist they can work with. They have mental health or a sports psychologist. They have all sorts of different people that are really available as resources for the athletes to reach out to and talk with if they have a specific problem. And it's amazing, right? When it's done well, it's really, really incredible. I mean, I work with a lot of teams and I know some still have some communication problems and some issues, but generally it's accepted very, very well. And you can see that the athletes get really high quality of care at that level. So what needs to happen is we need to try our best to evolve this model and put it into the club level, the elite level, pretty much everywhere that exists, and not only save this for, the national team highest of the high caliber or, the coaches that are with NCAAs or stuff like that. We want to try to figure out how we can build a version of this model for everybody, right? And I am very, very honest and very, very in tune with the reality that the main barrier to this is going to be money, right? It is very hard financially to hire a whole staff of, people to come for PTs and ATs and sports psychs. It's really challenging to get all those people to work at your gym or live at your gym, right? Or get a facility that has all of those things in one. That's not realistic like a college setting is, right? Also, I know that based on the geographic location, sometimes it's really challenging to get providers within distances that are feasible to drive, right? If you live somewhere in the Midwest, you live somewhere out in kind of the outer lands of different countries, it's really challenging to get someone to a physio back and forth, right? It might take 45 minutes or something might be challenging for that to happen. So I really know that that's tough, right? I'm really fortunate. I work in Boston. I live in Boston. We have some of the best medical teams around. We have some phenomenal coaches. We have some phenomenal gyms, but that's not the reality for everyone. So I know that's a thing, and I want to talk about maybe what you can do to work around that, okay? And then also, I know that just not everybody gets along, right? Like there's no hard way to say it besides that, but some coaches are not open-minded to working with other professionals. Some medical providers are really not willing to put in the work to understand gymnastics and really know the injuries and really understand what's going on. Some people, well-minded as they are, their egos are too big for the team mentality, right? They're not able to get past that. I know what's best in my way or the highway, and it kind of fractures the relationship and it makes it very challenging for someone to work in a team. So thankfully that's a minority of the situation, right? That doesn't always really happen, but that is a very honest reality that I think a lot of people struggle and deal with. And hopefully my advice will maybe break down some of those walls and give you a little bit more of an option to work with, okay? Now, why do we need this, right? What's the most important goal of this, right? Number one, Goodness, gymnastics is hard, right? Like in the last 10 to 15 years, it has gotten so much harder. It's impossible for a gymnastics coach to do it all. And I empathize with gymnastics coaches, obviously being one. When you are on your own and you're trying to, balance all this stuff, you're getting questions about not only gymnastics technique and strength and conditioning and all that stuff. You're getting questions about injuries and mental health and emotional stuff and puberty and changing, right? All this stuff combined with, oh yeah, in the leotards, oh yeah, in the hotels, oh yeah, in the actual coaching, oh yeah, in the extra hours and the weekends, right? It is so, so hard for a gymnastics coach to do everything. And I think it's so important to make sure that we are getting this model evolved because of that aspect of not putting too much on one person, but it being so challenging that it's impossible for you to be able to do it without that, right? Two, it's so important for performance, right? How in the world can you expect someone to get the most out of their possible potential if you don't have an expertise in all the things that requires of it, right? So gymnastics, for example, like we said, the technical development, the actual doing the skills, the teaching the skills, when to do them, the progressions, the spotting, right? Which coaches are experts in, but also strength and conditioning, right? The science of strength and conditioning is incredibly evolved and it's moving so fast, particularly for the sport of gymnastics, which is getting much more research and attention. You have to know how to program, right? Body weight conditioning for gymnastics specific stuff, but you also need to program external weightlifting now. You need to know these hybrid programs. You need to understand periodization and workloads and peaking and tapering, right? That's an entire career in itself as a strength coach. Not to mention, you have to be aware of what types of injuries might occur and how to prevent those and prehab and stuff as a medical provider has expertise in. You also need to understand about nutrition and sports psychology and energy systems and all that kind of stuff. It's a lot, man. It's really, really a lot. And I think it's naive to think that as an individual, right, not even talking about a coach, but as an individual, like a medical provider or a strength coach, there's no way you're going to be really good at all those things, right? You might be extremely good at one of those and have a little bit of a side hustle on something else. Like for me, for example, like I feel like I'm a pretty good medical provider and I kind of have a little side hustle. I know strength conditioning really, really well. I know gymnastics coaching really, really well. I know nothing about nutrition that could be, interventionally at a safe level, right? I know nothing about sports psychology that would make me an expert for that. So I have to defer all the time in athletes that I coach. And when I'm talking to people who have issues like that, I defer to my network of friends that I've developed to try to help them get in the right position to get the services they need, right? So that's because I want the athlete's performance to be the most big priority along with their health and wellness. And I'm naive, to say that I'm going to be the one who can fix all those things. So performance, if you really want the most out of, not only your own coaching to elevate your game, but also the athletes you work with, it's really more important to have this kind of separated, less direct model where everyone's working together. That's going to be better for the overall performance. Okay. Clearly, athlete health and wellness is going to benefit more when we have a variety of experts who are willing to put in the effort and kind of put the athlete first. That is clearly going to be the most important thing, right? And it's hard because sometimes you have someone who's an expert, quote unquote, but they don't really have the information specific to gymnastics that you need, or they're kind of a pseudo expert, whereas they may have a couple tips and tricks here and there, but they don't have a really good mastery of the concepts that they're supposed to be training in. So you need to make sure you're finding the right qualified people who are not only experts in their technical field or their area, but they're also willing to work on part of a team and not let their ego get wrapped into it, okay? And then lastly, I'm very aware of this, like I said, as someone who is a coach or is a medical provider. If we spread the load out across the demand for the athlete's care, it reduces the risk of burnout by any one person, right? Like I said, coaches are very commonly overloaded. They're often overworked and underpaid. So they get dumped all this stuff onto them. They don't know what's going on. They feel frustrated. And then, of course, they get burnt out. But vice versa, that can happen with a medical provider who is being asked to get all the injuries looked at, write the strength program, and do the workload stuff, and talk to parents, and make sure you're talking with prehab programs for coaches, right? Like that's so much for someone to be on top of. So getting some of that kind of offloaded to a nutritionist, for example, or a strength coach or a gymnastics coach, and everybody kind of divides and conquers based on their expertise and what they're good at, but also what they want to be passionate about. It helps so much to make sure that person's not going to burn out by the end of the season. So many, many benefits to this entire process. And this is currently what I think a lot of gyms deal with, right? This is really tough, but this is honestly the model that I've seen in so many places and that I've also dealt with myself as a younger provider is, right, you have the gymnast kind of over here. The parent obviously is talking to the gymnast back and forth. The gymnast is talking to the coach. The gymnast is talking to the parent's talking to the coach, right? Sometimes you get a medical doctor involved. The parent talks to that person and relays it back to the coach. The gymnast is stuck in the middle. Then you get someone to the rehab provider. The parent and the gymnast work with the medical provider. That person sometimes talks to the coach. They sometimes don't. They talk to the doctor goes back to the rehab provider. Like, it's an absolute hot mess, right? Like it's impossible to get everybody on the same page, let alone talk the same lingo, because everyone's just scattered, right? Everyone's all over the place, and it's kind of like a need to know basis, or a kind of a, as you see fit kind of thing. And I think that's just the absolute worst way for this to happen. It leads to just massiveness of chaos, right? Like, everyone's confused. Nobody really knows. We're chasing phone calls. We're trying to find somebody. And obviously what happens is the gymnast ends up suffering, right? They don't get the best quality of care. They don't get the best performance, the best wellness, and they really feel as though they're stuck in the middle. And it's extremely stressful for the gymnast who is just trying to train and just trying to do the right thing, but their coach is upset with something. The parent doesn't really know. The rehab provider hasn't talked to the coach. They don't have a plan. They get re-injured. They're out for the meet. They have a mental block, or they have some issues with nutrition. They're underfueled. All of those things make it extremely stressful on the actual athlete. So we want to make sure that's not the priority of what we're trying to build. Instead, this is what we want, right? Ideally, the parent and the gymnast are coexisting in that kind of center bubble, because they're obviously back and forth on top of how much they talk and how important it is, particularly if they're under the age of 18. But what happens is we want this center bubble where the gymnast and the parent are very open in communication. They're honest about their goals. They're honest about what they want, and they know what's going on. And everybody is talking to the ring, right? The ring is going to be that connector with everybody. So the ring is connecting, the nutritionist, the coach, the medical doctor, the rehab, the strength coach. Everybody is inside connected to that ring, and they're able to talk to each other and relay what's best for the athlete, okay? And it seems like a utopian dream, right, that would happen, but honestly, it's not as impossible as you think. You might not be able to get all the providers that you want in this ring, but with some really good work and communication and some mutual benefit for everybody, you can get a lot of really good benefit, and you can get most of these people on the same page. Again, being someone who kind of is involved with a variety of different gyms around my area or around the world, I'm able to talk with these groups of people, because we can all sit down on a Zoom meeting, or we can all sit down in a chat one time every few months, and I can kind of talk with each of them and share what I think, and they can talk to each other and foster good communication. So it is absolutely totally possible. It's definitely not, this utopian fantasy land. Okay. Appreciation for that gift right there. So who is part of the team, right? So these are the main 7. There's so many more. I don't want to discount anybody's expertise or anyone's role, but these are just the 7 that came to my mind that I think I deal with the most. So that's the ones that I put down. Okay. So obviously the gymnast and the parent are probably the center of this. The gymnastics coach, the rehab provider, so a physical therapist, an athletic trainer, a sports chiropractor. There's a lot of different types of people that could work in there. And the medical doctor are kind of together, right? They oftentimes communicate as one unit. So a surgeon and a rehab PT or something like that, or a medical doctor and a PT or something like that. Those 2 people are kind of often together. Obviously, a strength conditioning coach is becoming much, much more popular in the gymnastics world. So having someone who's working with your team. A nutritionist, and a sports psychologist, or a mental health provider. Those are kind of the big ones. Obviously, there's many more. I don't want to discredit anybody. I don't want anyone to feel bad, but those are kind of the big rocks of a team that I would try to build if I was starting from scratch. Okay, so what should you look for in someone who's a great gymnastics coach, right? And this is oftentimes thought about, but number one, they have to be a good person, right? They have to have morals. They have to listen. They have to have a really good emotional control. They have to have a growth mindset. That is someone you want on this team, because not only are they going to be great at their own technical expertise, they're going to be willing to listen and communicate and keep talking with people. The best gymnastics coaches that I know, that I've learned from, that I value and I recommend for people, are not only the ones that are technically great, they're ones that are constantly learning, and they're constantly thinking about how they can improve. They're accountable, right? They're humble. They want to make sure they know what's the best thing for the athletes, and they don't let their egos get in the way. Okay, they are technically sound. They have to know good gymnastics basics, progressions, fundamentals, right? They have to understand the actual skills, the nature of the sport, and how to teach and spot those skills. So if you're a medical provider, or if you're a sports nutritionist, or if you're a mental health provider, or someone, or a parent, and you're looking into gyms, you're trying to find someone, you want to understand that person really values basics and progressions and fundamentals, even if they're boring, even if they're basic, even if they're mundane, right? That idea around fundamentals and really good grunt work method is really the glue that holds together someone's gymnastics career. So if you're going into a gym and you're talking with someone and they're just talking about big skills and throwing this and we get the biggest scores and blah, 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 you might want to raise an eyebrow at that, right? Instead, as if you go and you see really good lines, really good clean fundamentals, doing the boring stuff, doing the basic stuff, being proactive, right? Doing prehab and maintenance care type work and basics in their warm-ups. That's kind of what you want. And obviously, You want someone who is going to be able to have command of the skill level they work at. If they're a recreational coach and they're just absolutely crushing it recreational level with spotting and teaching and lesson plans, that's amazing. If they're a level 10 or an international elite coach, but they understand exactly how to teach these skills, progressions, they've had people be successful, they know how to spot, they know when to kind of wean off a spot, that's great too. It doesn't matter the level, it matters the person's in their own lane, right? They want to be able to do and enjoy that level that they work at. That's really the key, regardless of what discipline you work in, men's, women's, artistic, rhythmic, doesn't matter, right? Okay, and then lastly, I think this is important for coaches, is that you want to be compassionate but productive, right? So you can have expectations while still having fun, right? You can set guidelines and rules and have structure without being an abusive coach, without being a monster, right? And I think that's really important because gymnastics is extremely dangerous if it doesn't have that structure, if it doesn't have a little bit of, self-accountability and discipline and focus, right? It can be very, very dangerous, very, very fast. So I know that we're in a time in gymnastics where we're obviously getting rid of some people who are really not appropriate to be in gymnastics, but we can't mistake, the appropriate discipline and focus that is needed for abusive coaching, right? They're two completely different things, right? One is about safety and potential and helping the athletes get to their goals. The other one is just mean, right? And outright not allowed. So when you go in a gym, if it's structured and people are following directions and they're moving well and all that kind of stuff, that's completely different than someone who's screaming at the kids and is flying off the handles. So I don't want you to mistake, some sternness or maybe some structure for someone who's maybe off the handle and going too wild. So you do want to see that a little bit, because if not, you can't reach your goals productively, and it gets very, very dangerous from a safety point of view. If you're just having fun willy-nilly all the time, everyone's just going their own thing, there's a lot of risk for something bad to go there. Okay, what about a medical provider? I get this question a lot from coaches, like, okay, what should I look for in someone who's a medical provider? Okay, number one, be a good human, right? All the exact same stuff. Someone who's compassionate, someone who listens, someone's really open to learning, open to new ideas. They're willing to communicate really, really well. They have good listening skills. But also, is when you look more on the medical side, particularly for rehab professionals, you really want to find someone who's licensed medically with either a master's or a doctorate level of training, right? And most people fall into that, right? So athletic trainers, physical therapists, sports chiropractors, nurses, right? You want to find people who have that level of training, because it really requires a significant amount of time and effort to be really technically proficient with the things that we're doing here. So because gymnastics is such a high-risk sport, there's nothing wrong with getting a bachelor's degree and having an education and wanting to help out. But if you're prescribing medical care, you need to have a medical license, right? So I know it's easy sometimes to, follow magazine advice or blog advice or YouTube advice and stuff like that. But honestly, it's almost always going to do more harm than good, right? You want to make sure you're finding someone who is running those channels or those blogs and has a good license credentialing to go with that, right? So those are the things that is really important, because they're going to learn anatomy, physiology, sports rehab, right? Biomechanics, pathomechanics, injury mechanics. They're going to understand those things, and they're going to have a really good working knowledge of what that means for the athlete in front of you. It'd be really, really good if that person was a gymnast or understands gymnastics or works with a lot of gymnasts, obviously, but also people who are willing to learn make a massive, massive impact too. And the best example of this is my buddy, Josh Eldridge. He's board certified. He's got his diploma in sports chiropractor. He wasn't a gymnast at all, right? His wife was, and then his daughter came into gymnastics, and he really didn't have a ton of knowledge, but he just went there. He just went to practice. He said, hey, can I just sit here and listen and learn and ask questions with the coaches? The coach is like, yeah, by all means, absolutely. And over the course of multiple years, because he was so willing to put the work in and really understand it, he was able to apply his expert level of doctoral training and put it into gymnastics. And now he's one of the most respected gymnastics providers that we have in the field, right? So it's not about having to do gymnastics. It's about being willing to learn and put in the hours to study and understand what they're going through. So I don't want people to automatically kind of brush off people who didn't do gymnastics and say, oh, you don't get it. You never did gymnastics. You don't understand. It's a different perspective, but sometimes not having that experience is actually a good thing, because it forces them to really absorb all of the information from scratch. Okay. And you want someone who is constantly reading. You want someone who is constantly reading in the scientific evidence and the literature. I can't stress this enough, right? Another thing that's very, very concerning sometimes is the internet is a blessing and a curse. There is so much information out there and so many things to be a part of, but not all of it is sound, right? You can't just be reading headlines or reading abstract of articles and not really understanding the methods of those things, the statistical analysis, the implications of what that means, because it's very, very easy to say like, oh, well, this new study says, or, oh, hey, there's this blog that I read that talked about this research article. It doesn't mean that it's sound. It doesn't mean that it's always going to go well. So have to kind of have your ear to the ground to make sure you're understanding that that person is constantly looking at new science, new data. They're not just combing the abstract and pulling off headlines, but they really read it and they really understand it. And the person who does have a good grasp of the research will even be cautionary towards it. Say, I read the study and it had a few interesting points, but, we don't want to jump to conclusions. Just one study. It's a small sample size. You want to look at things that are broad, overarching principles across all of sports medicine. Okay. Ideally, this is not a necessary part of it, but ideally you would have someone who's also board certified in their field, right? So in physical therapy, we have things like an orthopedic certified specialist or a sports certified specialist, which is what I am. And also, some other things in sports chiropractic or AT. There are ways to become board certified to get a higher level than just the minimum. Not necessary, right? I know some phenomenal PTs that are literally just DPT. They don't have any things behind their name, but chances are the person who's board certified has really put in an extra 2 to 3 years of postdoctoral work to really crush, the thing that they're trying to go for sports or whatever else it is. So another really good bonus of a rehab provider is someone who is a strength coach as well. I'm a certified strength coach as well, and that's kind of helps me to put my my head in the other direction of when someone's more on the advanced rehab or the return to sport phase. So again, not a criteria that's make or break, like maybe the medical licenses, but really, really good to have in mind. Okay, what about a strength coach? So more and more strength coaches are getting involved in gymnastics. More teams are hiring strength coaches to come in and write their programming to help out with a hybrid model of weight training and also body weight specific programming. So for example, my buddy Dan Lonsdale goes to a lot of different gyms and they'll do the body weight kind of explosive, gymnastic specific stuff. He'll write the lifting and he'll write the strength programming and teach that and implement that and kind of make sure people are on the same page. So what does that look like, right? I'm not going to repeat it, but be a good person, right? That's more important. Okay, the biggest thing is that they're going to really understand the basics and the science of strength building and conditioning, which conditioning in this regard means like metabolic training or energy systems training, not just about like conditioning is what gymnastics thinks about, but they have a really good command of strength training, how to build strength, the difference of set and rep ranges and types of weight to use in programming, conditioning and different energy systems, but also how to use weights properly, how to, teach a squat, teach a hinge, teach a split squat, teach some pushing and pulling, program those things, what weight to use, what's a normal response to exercise, what's too much and all that kind of stuff, right? They want to have someone who really gets that at a basic level, but is willing to apply that again to gymnastics, right? So they may be, someone who works with a lot of baseball players and track and field athletes and soccer players, but if they're willing to put in the work and really understand well what the sport demands, they can learn quite a bit and apply that to gymnastics, okay? The head strength and conditioning coach at Champion Physical Therapy and Performance where I work, who has become an absolute master gymnastics strength coach. He knew nothing about gymnastics before 5 years ago, right? I walked in and I was a PT and he was like, oh, this is cool gymnastics. And more we started getting gymnasts coming to lift with us and they wanted to have us do their performance programming, particularly during the summer. And he had to learn, he had to study, he had to listen, he had to watch videos, he had to go to practices, he had to watch meets, he had to just break it down. We've had so many really long conversations about what gymnastics needs. And now I think he's one of the best in the business. And, we made a course together, right? Peak Gymnastics Power was kind of our brainstorm together of how we run hybrid models. And it was wildly successful because of Duesh's expertise. So Dan's the same way. Dan just started talking with Nick, met Nick Ruddick one day and said, hey, I'd like to help out. I did rugby or I knew this, but Dan was a monster, right? And learned a lot. Duesh was a monster, learned a lot too. And so now they're two of the best in the business because they were willing to sit down and learn and do it. So just because they didn't do gymnastics doesn't mean they're not wildly valuable to the community. So again, don't write off strength coaches who maybe don't know gymnastics right away. Field them out and see if they're good people and if they're willing to learn. And you might have a diamond in the rough who's going to become one of the most important assets for your gym. Okay. Along with that, most strength coaches are going to have a bachelor's degree, which is their starting point. But if they do have a master's or something higher than that, like a doctorate, that's phenomenal. The kind of the gold standard here in America anyways, is a certified strength and conditioning coach. So a CSCS is kind of more the gold standard academic. Again, not the worst case scenario if someone's not that, but just a little more academic combination and understands maybe reading research and stuff like that. So this person does also need to be up to date in the current science and literature. There's so much great evidence coming out in gymnastics strength and conditioning that if that person is up to date with that, whether they're reading articles or they're downloading them or they're going to conferences, whatever else it is, that person is going to be way ahead of the field and you're going to want that person in your back pocket. All right. And then lastly, nutritionist and a sports psych. This is not my area of expertise, so I'm not going to go super in depth here, but just from friends that I have, right, like Dr. Christina, or sorry, Christina Anderson, not a doctor. She's a wonderful provider. She has her master's. Christina Anderson, Carrie Bear, Josh Eldridge, these people that I mentioned before. Like, there's so many great people. Rebecca Smith is also a great sports psych that's working in the field as well. But I don't really know this super well, but I've talked to them, and this is kind of what they recommended. So ideally, it's going to be someone who is medically certified, right, for nutritionists on that side. You do have a medical degree as well for sports psychology if you go into psychiatry, but that's more like a medical doctor. But for nutritionists particularly, it's really important that this person tends to be medically certified, right? So they've gone through and done their licensing, because a sports nutritionist, particularly working in gymnastics, is going to have to deal with a lot of disordered eating, a lot of body image concerns, a lot of very in-depth prescriptions of like medically based, calories or macros or micros or all that kind of stuff. And that person has to be really proficient in being able to understand what these values mean and what the balances mean, what allergies they have, what dietary preferences, what dietary restrictions they have. That person's going to be really, really important, because it's so easy to get into hot water with disordered eating or body image and stuff like that. And looking back on my career, I wish I had gone to a licensed provider earlier. Again, I have nothing against people who are not medically licensed. I'm sure they're doing phenomenal work. I'm sure they're helping so many people. But in this category of gymnastics, I think it's really important you find someone who is, certified and medically licensed as a registered dietitian and nutritionist. That's the RDN is typically, or an RN is typically that credential you want to look for. So just my personal opinion. Don't mean to hurt anybody's feelings, but I just feel like it's so important when we dance in like disordered eating type stuff like that. Okay. Ideally, they have a master's or greater level in training. They don't always have to have like a doctorate or more than that. They would be board certified like Christina is or Carrie is. But just important to kind of keep in mind that that person has to have at least the master's in medical licensing they need to kind of be prescribing and making the right tinkering to some of the macros and stuff like that. Okay. Again, for both of these things, nutritionist and science-based sports psychology, they really have to be in the research. They really have to understand the evidence of what's coming out on the nutrition side about, the changes in different sciences or nutritional practices. On the sports psych side, about different developments in certain types of therapy, right? Or cognitive behavioral therapy, or different techniques that are working, or things like that. Obviously, these people need to understand gymnastics as well, but more so from a holistic point of view. They have to understand like the nature and the demands of how nutrition works in the body, what energy systems are required and how to do that. And then obviously the specific nature of the competitive stressors mentally that an athlete has. So lots of different things that I could go into more, but again, I'm not an expert here, so I didn't want to dive in too deep. All right, what are some practical things to take away here? How can we actually build these networks, okay? I personally believe, and this is coming from someone who has done a ton of this. I've tried so many different things in the last 10 years being a medical provider, whether it was traveling to gyms or speaking or trying to find ways to make partners and relationships, right? And these are really the only 5 things that I've found made a serious dent in things. So number 1 was donating your time, okay? So when I was a younger PT, man, I gave away so many free screens and so many free lectures and so many weekend trips. Like I would work in the clinic for 5 days in a row, drive to a gym, give a lecture, go home, wake up, drive to a gym, give a free lecture, talk about some people, give some screening, drive back home, right? Traveling always on the weekends to go to congresses and clinics and share lectures and stuff. One, because I loved it. It's fun to teach and I enjoy helping people, but also because I knew that was the best way to build trust and rapport over time, right? Me just, typing on my blog or, giving phone calls to people and coaching and stuff like that was not going to be enough. So I strongly encourage coaches, like go to the PT clinic with one of your athletes. And if you get a medical permission slip signed from their mom or their dad or their guardian, you're allowed to go in, watch, talk, release information, just see how they do stuff, see why they're doing it, ask them questions. PTs and ATs and chiros that are asking me how to get their foot in the door with gyms they want to get involved more, I say you better just donate your time, go watch practice, hang out, ask questions, just get to know people, see what they need help with, see what their common problems are. And same thing with strength coaches, like go to the clinic, go to the practice, right? See what the demands of gymnastics are. And then maybe say, hey, can we meet up for lunch one day? Or hey, can we just chat sometime? I've had so many hours, hundreds of hours of lunches and Zoom meetings or phone calls with coaches and PTs and doctors and parents. I've done so much of that kind of stuff, knowing that there was zero financial gain, not going into it for a money-making thing, but just because it's good to build rapport and build trust, and down the road you'll work together and things will happen. But the more you can give your time to people, the better off it's going to be, right? It's not going to be great to work in this isolated silo and hope people just magically walk in the door and trust you. Trust is earned, not given. Okay, number 2, focus on performance. And this is when I learned the hard way. My first couple of years, I was really all about, trying to go for injury prevention. And that's really important. We all know it's important, but everybody wants that, but the reality is that's not as fun to talk about, right? It's not as like sexy as they say, right? If you go in and talk about Sever's disease or back pain, most people will be involved, but it won't really stick long term. If you go in and say, hey, what are your biggest issues? What's wrong? They're going to go, oh man, they're not fast enough. They don't jump high enough. Their tumbling isn't great. We can't get good toe point. We don't have enough, dynamic bar skills. You can pick apart those things from a strength and conditioning point of view and reverse engineer what might be going into that. And chances are some of the same things that you're going to answer those questions with is going to be helpful for injuries, right? So in the running example, if someone needs to run faster, we probably need some stronger legs, probably need some stronger glutes in particular and hamstrings. So doing some weighted hip lifts and doing some hamstring specific work that the research says is great. It's going to get them some nice strong legs to run from, but also it's probably going to help their backs feel a little bit better, right? So you kind of slowly pick apart the lowest hanging fruit of what they need. As you build more trust, as you build more rapport, then you can kind of dance along the next one and be like, okay, well, what else are you having problems with? And you go, oh, their knees are always bugging them. You say, oh, okay, if their knees really bug them all the time, maybe we can talk about landing form. Maybe we can talk about some leg strength and some landing mechanics to make sure it's, properly dispersing that force, but also that will help their knee as well. And hey, by the way, you'll probably stick more routines. You'll stick more dismounts if we do that, right? You work on that for a while, and then you start to dance into the more sensitive topics, right? About like, hey, maybe we should change our stretching stuff, or maybe we should lift weights, or maybe we should look at the volume, right? Then once you've built a rapport with them over 6 to 12 months, then you can finally do that. But starting with those things and kind of kicking the door in is a mistake that I made, and you instantly kind of put everyone on their back foot, and they don't really want to talk about it. All right. Number 3 is invest in gymnastics education, right? I think that going to the gym or talking to people at the clinic and stuff is by far the best thing. But if you can take the initiative to learn a lot about the sport itself, not only will that help you obviously treat people better or coach better or something like that, it will also show them that you're really interested, you're really invested if you're putting in your own time and resources, right? If you come to the gym and you say, hey, I read this great textbook, there's this awesome chapter, and I never knew this about core strength, right? Or this about, leg strength or something with bar releases. Can you tell me more about that? Like, you're the expert here. Can you let me know? Coaches would love to hear that, right? Same thing with medical providers. If you have a coach that comes in and says, hey, I was reading this book and, they said that, lower back pain was a huge problem in a lot of gymnasts. And they said that maybe it might be from, someone who's limited in their hip flexibility. I know you can screen for that. Can we have a conversation about how I would screen for that or what we would do for that? Medical providers would absolutely love that, right? That'd be cool. So check out all these great books they have, right? There's so many awesome textbooks. There's so many awesome courses online. There's discussion groups, there's blogs, there's articles. So just kind of find something that fits your interest and dig into it for a little while. A lot of the students that come to me and work with me or mentor under me, I say, take a topic for a month and really do a nice deep dive, right? Take something you're really passionate about, take something you really want to know about it, and don't make it like an evening or a weekend. Like, give it a full month. Give it like 30 to 60 minutes per day for a full month. Like, you'll be a monster. You'll get a lot of really great information out of that, and you'll really be able to master something more. Then you can move on to another topic once you feel as though you've gotten a lot there. But I think it's a really great way to kind of keep that idea rolling and keep that initiative rolling. But also you can bring those to the gym and maybe do like a research review, or you can do a lecture review, or you can teach 5 to 10 minutes on some new hip exercises you learned, or have a staff in service for 30 minutes on gymnastics, leaps and jumps. And you can work with the coach and build that lecture together and collaborate a little bit, which is pretty cool. So I personally find that the more I did this, the more I really mastered the science of gymnastics, or the understanding of gymnastics, whether it was technical or flexibility, whatever. More people were interested in kind of hanging out and listening together and talking about what the problems were. So beyond that, though, I think you can learn it from a lot from each other, but you do have to kind of dig your heels in and work on being really good yourself, right? The better you can make yourself, whether that's personal development or mastering your craft, the more valuable you're going to be to someone in the gymnastics community, right? So if you're a coach, you should be spending a lot of time about technical progressions of mastering these skills and knowing how to spot and knowing how to progress and knowing strength and conditioning, right? That's going to be a way to elevate your game as a coach and then make you more valuable to a gym. But also the coaches who do that probably are going to attract medical providers and strength coaches that people want to learn from them, and they're going to get a nice partnership together. Okay, if you're in the medical field, obviously you have to know a lot about gymnastics injuries, but you should also be learning a lot about strength and conditioning and periodization and workloads and wellness. That really is a nice next level of stuff to understand, right? If I just knew a lot about gymnastics injuries but not about the rest of it, I wouldn't be as good as a provider and I wouldn't have great results. Great results get you better referrals, right? But they also get you more trust with the coaches, right? If you do a great job and you care about the athletes and you really do put your best foot forward and you're going the extra mile, and you happen to have a really great set of tools that can help someone get better and is realistically helping them, they're going to really want to keep coming back to you. That word of mouth referral is going to be great, but also you're going to build trust that way. Okay, for strength coaches, you really want to focus all of your attention, if you're working in gymnastics, around building explosive power, right? Explosive body weight power, and adopting these new ideas that we're doing now, which is more of this hybrid-based model, which is blending both traditional gymnastics body weight strength training with lifting and strength and conditioning, right? So if you're getting into it and you're saying, okay, how can I help these athletes more? You want to be taking courses, you want to be understanding where that kind of comes from, because that's going to give you a lot more value to offer to the coaches when they say, hey, can we get those jumps higher? Hey, can we get those sprints faster? You're going to know in your head the science of how to build explosive sprinting speed, and you're going to really be valuable in that person's community. Okay, then sports psych and nutrition. The biggest thing, obviously, along with understanding the nuances of nutrition or mental psychology or stuff, is understanding the sport demands and the season demands, right? If you can really understand the ins and outs of gymnastics and what they demand from a mental or a physical point of view, and also what that looks like across the different seasons, whether it's off season versus preseason versus in season and championship season, you're going to know how to be malleable and help the athlete based on where they're at, right? It's just not just a cookie cutter, one size fits all for this sport. You really have to understand the ebb and flow of different parts of the year. So if you're a nutritionist or a sports psychologist, I would really focus on that. All right. And then lastly, I think that communication is by far and away the glue that holds this all together. Okay. So you will need probably some medical release forms or consent forms from parents and gymnasts to go into that. But if you have that under your belt, you can talk professionally about things that are going on that they want to release. And that will really make you understand what's happening, right? I can't tell you how many times I've talked to a coach and then talked to a parent and talked to a gymnast, and they're all saying different things, right? What the gymnast wants versus the coach wants versus what the parent wants is really, really all over the place. And I tell them honestly, I'm like, hey guys, listen, guys or girls, I say, hey, listen, until you all talk about what the common goal is here and what you want out of this, it's really going to be hard for me to make a program that's going to help you. So you guys have a meeting, talk about what you guys think is important, what you guys want to get out of this, make sure your goals are aligned. Then we'll circle back and we'll do a rehab program and a strength program after that. But if you are all talking at different, volumes and also different paces, it's really, really overwhelming. So the more you can share, the more honest you can be, the better professional interactions that you can have, the better. Okay. So you do that with phone calls, right? But also like a group WhatsApp message. I've seen some gyms that do that. They have like their parents, medical providers, their strength coaches, everyone is in a common WhatsApp group. So the privacy is, PR and it's all good, but they can, DM and talk on an inside sports network instead of just having random texts and random emails and random phone calls. It's a little bit better when everyone's kind of on a group thread around one gymnast privately, or they're sharing common updates to the entire stuff, right? So that's really, really good to do. Other piece of it that's good as you talk more, as you work with people more, as you get common language. So, parents and medical providers know what a Takachev is or a back extension roll, and coaches will understand what a patella is, which is a knee joint, right? Or a spine, a lumbar spine versus a thoracic spine, upper versus lower spine. Just these small little nuanced things. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be a ninja with all that kind of stuff, but you should be able to hear those words, right? Hear the skills and understand that as a medical provider or strength coach. And as a coach, hear those kind of medical or strength and conditioning terms like rate of force development and have a general idea of what those mean, right? Because that allows you to kind of talk back and forth and plan around the entire athlete's program, okay? Something I do think is really cool too, I've seen a couple gyms do and I've seen work really, really well, is every 2 months, as if you were to have a staff meeting, but plus all of these people involved, right? So invite the strength coach in, invite the medical providers in, say, hey, can you guys come by on a Friday afternoon? We'll take an hour of the end of practice and we'll grab some food or some snacks and we'll just, hang out. We'll just talk. We'll just see what you guys think is, something we need to work on, or a problem, everyone's having wrist pain, or, we need to all work on our flexibility, or season's coming up. What can we do to do some athlete education for wellness or stuff like that? It's really cool. And I think that's what college programs do, obviously every single day or week. But if you can find a way to do that in a nice team setting every few months, it really, really excels, how well those athletes are doing. Okay. And these are just my pieces of parting advice. Okay. Number one, focus on long-term relationships. There's too many people who are trying to get a short-term gain, whether it's monetary or publicity or fame or whatever you want to call it. It never works. The athletes always are the ones who suffer. So don't focus on the short-term investment. Focus on long-term investments, okay? I'm much more of a people over profits person, as you'll see here. And what I mean by that is that I care more about helping people in the short term and helping deliver high quality of service and trust and in relationships. The money comes down the road. I understand it's a business. You work in a gym, it's a business. You want to get paid as a coach. You run a clinic. I promise you, if you treat people well and you build good relationships long-term, the money will come in, right? I can't tell you how many people have gotten referred to me from their friends or a teammate or a parent group or whatever, just because they finally had a good experience and they were happy, right? And then, the money comes down the road as it is. If you go the other way and you talk about money and how much can we make and commissions and referral bonuses, like that goes right away real fast, right? I hate that stuff. So it's not that you can't talk about money, you can't make a profit. I obviously run a business, right? But I don't think that starting with the conversation of money is going to be good. It feels slimy, it feels gross. So go more on how can we help people, how can we help the athletes, and the money will work itself out. All right. The rising tide lifts all boats. And what that phrase means is that don't be afraid to give away things for free and share, right? Don't hold your cards close to you like you're going to have some competitive advantage. Give things away, right? I've given so much information away for free, and just because I feel like that's the valuable way to do it, but it's also the way that I think I've gotten a lot back. I've learned so much from other coaches, PT, strength coaches, mentors of mine, because I was willing to give away what I think is my expertise, and they in return were able to share with me what they thought their expertise was, and we mutually benefited from each other. Nick and myself and Eva and myself, my best friend and boss, Eva Shute, we are perfect examples of this, right? We all have different examples. Nick, obviously coaching, me in the medical world, strength coaching as well, Eva in psychology. I have just shared so much information, multiple long 2, 3, 4 hour talks about. They ask me questions, I give them some ideas, I ask them questions, they give me some ideas, and we're all better because of it, okay? So I really would put the effort forward of giving things away and trying to be helpful instead of, hiding your secrets and making someone pay you for it. And that leads with this, which I'll leave on, is just make sure you are checking your ego, right? So if you are in it for your own fame, your own selfishness, your own money, call it whatever it is. I don't think most people are, but if you're in it for what you're going to get out of it, it is going to be a disaster. Okay. So start with humility and just doing the right thing and trying to help people and grow more and get your education on, all that kind of stuff. The rest is fantastic, right? If you can have a group of people who are humbly working on themselves personally and professionally, but are also humbly trying to help the athletes as the centerpiece in this chessboard, it's going to go really, really well. If you have someone in there who's, overstepping the bounds or doesn't want to listen or isn't really into it, it's probably not going to be the best long-term relationship. And honestly, I would not even waste your time. I would not try to convince that person to change. It's not going to work. I would spend your time and your effort elsewhere on people who are a little bit more open-minded. And I've learned that the hard way, but it's honestly the best way to do it. You can't, make someone change. You can't make someone think something. So hopefully that helps. All right. And so, no gymnast equals no jobs, right? It's all about them, right? Coaches, I love you. But if there's no gymnast doing gymnastics, we don't have jobs, nor do we as, medical providers working in gymnastics. So keep that in mind. All right. If you guys have any questions, hop on over to Shift HQ. I'd be happy to break this down more and share some more ideas here, but hopefully that answers a lot of the common questions people have had around this. So I'll see you guys inside.